Hey Necromaniacs, today I want to go over the 7 deadliest Arbiter sins. So I've made every single one of these Arbiter mistakes, and I wanted to use my experience to hopefully let you guys know what not to do when you're arbiting a campaign. So first is going to be the rules bloat. So let's go over that. Okay guys, thank you for coming over to play in this new Dark Uprising campaign.
No problem, man. I always love to bust out my Goliaths, yeah. I don't care what you say, river guns are the best. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, my newly painted enforcers are ready to rock and roll. But before we get started rolling dice, let's go over some of the added rules you'll need to read over before we start the campaign. First, you're going to add the new trading post. I know you're all familiar with that. And we're also going to add the bad zones from the Book of Peril. Okay, yeah, there we go. And we got a few more. Book of Judgment.
How many copies of these do you have? Oh my goodness.
Oh, and the resurrection packages from the White Dwarf 453 also will be adding all of the alliances from the Book of Judgment.
Necrons, what's that
Can
doing?
we just get to playing with the first scenario and maybe worry
Book of
about doing all this
Judgment
later?
again,
Book of Chains and Book of Peril.
Book of Judgment, Book of Peril.
I was going to do just a few, but then I decided to throw them all in. Then I was reading from the House Favors book and the Book of Ruin last week, and they are really cool, so we're definitely going to need those.
Book of Judgment, Book of Peril, Book of Ruin. Necrons, what's that doing in there?
Next, we'll be using the law-abiding and outlaw rules from the Book of Judgment, as well as the House subplots from the core rulebook. They are so awesome. Finally, we'll be starting the campaign off with the Assault on Precinct 17 scenarios from the November 2019 White Dwarf. There you go. So if you guys will take an hour or two to read up on all those sections that I have marked for you, then we can start playing. Now, as you can see, this Arbiter's kind of overdone it. Now, I guess the main thing, don't be afraid to put new things into a campaign, but just do 1 or 2. Don't add every single new rulebook that you find, every single White Dwarf article you find into a campaign, because you'll start to forget stuff, if nothing else, and leave out bits and stuff that you really wanted to enjoy, and you're going to forget them. So just so that you can get straight to playing, so you don't spend 4 hours in between scenarios, keep those added on rules to a minimum. Just add in a few during the first campaign and then add a few different ones in on the next campaign. That way it makes it a change up every time. So yes, you could I know you want to make the greatest, most amazing scenarios and campaigns, but you got to keep some of that extra rule stuff to a minimum. Otherwise it can really get overwhelming. So take that into account, and that's going to be sin number 1. Sin number 2, not scheduling your next meetup. Okay guys, this is very important. Before you let everybody start to pack up, grab those last few snacks, grab their keys and start heading out, you gotta get everybody around the tables and say, all right guys, when can you play next? Everybody, let's talk it out. Let's figure out when the next time is that we can play. And it doesn't matter, get the closest time that you can to when you just played. You don't wanna plan for 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks out. Try to get, I'd say 2 weeks out is a great time to plan. Most people can plan 2 or 3 weeks out, but once you get past 3, 4, 5 weeks, it starts to be so far out there that people will start to forget about it. They won't put it in their phones. That's the other thing. Make people like put a reminder in their phone so that they remember that it's coming up, and so that you guys can have that scheduled and you know when that next time. I don't know how many campaigns of 40K skirmish battles, Necromunda, Blood Bowl that just kind of fell apart because we never scheduled the next session and it never happened. Okay, sin number 3 is rules over fun. And probably the best way I can describe this is saying, if you got an Arbiter out there and he's like, sorry, you can't make that climb. You were 1/8 of an inch off, and so you can't climb up that building or something like that, where the rules are trumping the story and you're not letting something happen because it's a weird on the edge argument, or maybe just a question that somebody has for the Arbiter, and the Arbiter decides to go with the rules instead of going with the fun factor of it. If something's going to happen, let it happen. Now, if you need to, ask both players and say, hey, are you okay with this? Are you okay with this? Okay, great. Then that's what we're going to play. Sin number 4. Okay, this is going to be just like we were talking about, thinking outside the box. Sometimes a player might suggest, hey, That guy's crew got wrecked last game. He's going up against the best player in the campaign, who has the most gold, or I guess the most credits, the most players, etc. And he's got like 3 guys standing. Do you mind if I let 2 of my Orlocks go fight for him? He can control them, and they'll join him this battle, and maybe that way he won't just get stomped this game. Now, again, that's completely against the rules. It's not really in any book that I can think of. It's just a player trying to make sure it's a fair game for another player. And what I would say is, again, ask both the players in that match. Say, hey, are you okay if this guy gives him 2 Orlocks to come help his gang because he only has like 3 guys standing, and it's going to be your 10 guys against his 3? Most of the time, I guess in my group, most of my players are going to be like, heck yeah, I want to kill some Warlocks. Send them in. Let's murder those guys. Hey guys, I just want to add one thing. If that Warlock gang is trying to assist this other gang, there should be a good story reason for that, and they should come to you and let you know what that is. They should come up with like, hey, we're starting a tentative alliance, and this is the first thing we're going to do is try this out. Or maybe there's a campaign reason that he's trying to stop that, I guess, better gang from getting maybe a specific campaign territory or something like that. There should be a story reason that you allow something like this to happen. Sin number 5 is going to be tinkering, and I am the worst at this. You don't want to get those arbiters who have tweaked the rules so much and have done so much tinkering. And oh yeah, by the way, they haven't play tested any of it, but we decided to make las guns strength 10, and also auto guns are now strength 6. So it's just a little tinkering I'm going on. I haven't play tested it, but let's try it out. Don't tinker. I guess if you're gonna do it, maybe do 10 or more test games and see how it goes. Now, what I would say is say you bump up a las gun and then play a bunch of Escher games with those las guns. Those Eschers should still only win about 50% of the time, I would say. If they win 90% of the time, you've probably bumped it up too much. It's just a good example of tinkering with las guns. If you do any of that and it makes that gang unbeatable, then you probably need to dial it back a little bit. So be careful with tinkering. Play test it before the players come over. Don't let them be your guinea pigs. They want to have fun. They don't want to get stomped by Escher with las guns that are strength 10. They want to play the game, have it be fair. But if there's something like I feel the warp, I guess the weird power is a little underpowered, and I'm looking at bumping some of those up. Also, the Hive Scum and Bounty Hunters, I'm going to bring some of their points down because some of them are not great, but they're still almost 400 points. We're going to bump those down a little bit. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to play test those guys multiple games by myself in my garage before I ever put those guys out there for my players to play with. Deadly Sin number 7. Okay, this one's got to do with Resurrection. I am very scared of misusing the Resurrection packages that have come in the White Dwarf. I even did a video about it earlier, but there's only a few of them that I feel are fair and just kind of allow that character to come back for a few times, and they have a timer, and so he'll come back. He's not overpowered. He'll last 3, 4, 5 more games, and then he drifts away and goes off into the Hive. I feel that's fair. I don't like bringing a character back and making it so death is irrelevant. Be very careful with that because it takes away a lot from the game to not have it be important that your characters can die. It's very important in both Blood Bowl and Necromunda to be careful with your characters. Know when you need to just pull out. You need to, bottle test out of there and head out. Don't lose all your characters frivolously. Just be careful with them. And if you take that aspect away of that anybody can just come back anytime, no problem, it's going to take some of the fun away, I promise. The final and possibly worst sin of them all would be inconsistent rulings. If you're the Arbiter, you have to use the same rule set all the time. And that's another thing about using that rules bloat. You got to remember everything you've added in. You got to remember that all the time and make sure every character has their chance to go to those black markets, to get those hangers on that you've added in, get all those different things. So be careful about loading on too much. Be consistent with it. If you let someone use a resurrection package, you gotta let everybody else use it, stuff like that. Especially if you're a player and an arbiter, you even more so have to be consistent with your rulings because you don't want to be seen as unfair, especially if it's something that you're doing and you're not letting others players do. You got to stay consistent. So that's the last thing. All right, guys. That's my 7 deadly sins for Arbiters. Please let me know what you think in the comments below. Thank you, guys. Static out.